Hello. Now, this is the beginning of our one of the last sessions, session number 9, and we have contacted Matteo Pizzolante, and he will be first presenter because he was missing in one of the previous sessions. Matteo, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Very good. And I'll giving you 10 minutes, not more, because we are a bit behind schedule already in the beginning. Yes. I acquainted with you already beforehand, and I think if something is needed, it's up to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. No. Can you see it? Okay, perfect. So first of all, hi everyone, and thank you for having me today. My name is Matteo Pizzolante. I'm a visual artist, and I work and live in Milano. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project that I developed like 1.5 years ago, and the entire project lasted 1 year and was developed in close collaboration with the Monsters Lab. That is a lab in the JRC, the Joint Research Center in Istra, and led by the ecologist Peter Beck. The project is entitled Oscillum, and the project faces a problem that broke out in 2013, and it's about a disease that is threatening the health of olive trees and the surrounding landscape in Puglia, so in the southeast of Italy. And the phenomenon is known as olive peak decline syndrome. And now, the disease was seen for the first time in the southwest coast of Italy, of the southeast of Italy, and now is moving throughout the region towards north. And this one is like a map of the infected zone. The bacterium that causes this disease is called Xylella fastidiosa, and the bacterium colonizes the xylem network within plants. And the main function of xylem vessels is to transport water from plant roots to leaves. And so where the bacterium colonizes xylem vessels, the xylem vessels become blocked and the plant slowly dies. So as I said before, the project was developed with this group, the Monsters Lab, led by the ecologist Peter Beck. And this research group monitors forests using the remote sensing system. So basically they take like hyperspectral images and thermal images from aircrafts and drones. And thermal images because when the bacteria colonizes a tree, so the tree as a reaction not to waste water. The tree closes the stomatal holes, so the temperature increase. And it's a sort of fever. At the same time, they take hyperspectral images, and hyperspectral images is a specific kind of photographs. So normal photographs are in the RGB field. Meanwhile, the hyperspectral images are in the in the entire visible spectrum. So these two pictures are on the left side, an example of a graphic of the reflectance spectrum of a healthy leaf, the green area, and the necrotic area. And on the right side, it's a picture take from an aircraft, and you can see the reflectum graphic and at the level of a canopy. And these one are like the data that the group gave me. So in my project, basically, I transformed their data, so this one, so the reflectance into sounds, and this one are a series of pictures. But the same group collaborates with the CNR, that is like the National Research Center in Italy, and another research center in Spain, because the disease was seen for the first time like 15 years ago in California, and now is a big problem in the southeast of Italy and Spain. And now they're using two tools to measure the temperature of a single leaf, and also the reflectance spectrum at the level of a single leaf. These one are a series of other pictures, and you can see like two big squares on the floor, one white square and the other a black square, and they're putting these two big squares on the floor to calibrate the instruments, to calibrate the tools that is on the aircraft. So the project is entitled Oscillum. And the oscillum is inspired by an ancient Messapian custom. The Messapian were a tribe that inhabited Southern Apulia from 8th century before Christ to the 3rd century after. And the oscillum was a disc made out of terracotta that was hung up to trees to foretell and protect the fertility of vines and olive tree fields. So in my installation, that is this one, I transformed this disc into loudspeakers that spread out the sound that I produce into the room. So the installation at the end was like a video and sound it was a video and sound installation. For me, it was really interesting to talk about this project for many reasons. The first reason is because I live in Milan, but I come from that area, and also because the group of research. So the GRC is a specific research center. So the goal of the research group is to, of course, and to the European Parliament, and that who thanks to their research is able to take a decision. So the center is really related to policy making and to policy making, and the disease was seen for the first time in 2013, and the main reason is that because infected trees were imported by the South America. So there are main issues and topics related to this project. The first one is, of course, to talking about the virus and make this problem more visible. First, the second one is to talk about the role of information in this kind of project, because now no one is the problem is still there, but in Italy no one is talking about this, and when the disease was seen for the first time, like economical reason did it, but like the main reason is because is because like infected trees were imported. The third topic is the transformation of the environment, because the idea for me was to talk about the disease, but at the same time to describe and talking about the transformation of the environment, and also somehow like the biodiversity of the nature. Yeah.
We are already running out of the time. Maybe you can show your slides a bit.
Yeah. So maybe I can focus. This one are the data that the group of the research group gave me. So on the left there's the entire field that I studied, and on the right side are two images that are like a close-up. And these graphics are you can see that it's divided in like there are 5 curves, because the research group found 5 different levels of severity of the disease. And the remote sensing is really important, because thanks to this system, scientists can study how the bacteria moves from one tree to the other, and they can reveal disease there are not possible to see from how can I explain it? From human eye somehow, the group is working right now in the southeast of Italy, and at the same time in Spain, because the disease hits especially olive trees, but also different kinds of species, like for example almond trees. The difference is that for olive trees you can see the effect of the disease on trees. Meanwhile, for other species, they are colonized by the bacterium, but they don't show the effect of the disease.
Questions in the chat. We have to finish here about Matteo presentation. And I am very glad that for this opportunity to see, but now we need to go further with Tivon Rice video models for environmental literacy. And Tivon Rice holds PhD in digital art and experimental media from the University of Washington, and he was a Fulbright scholar and one of the first individuals to collaborate with Google Artists Plus machine intelligence. And now I hope video will start very shortly.
Hello, I am Tivon Rice. Thanks to RXC for organizing this wonderful program. I was able to visit Riga and attend the conference in person 2 years ago, so I really miss being there this year. The project that I want to share today has been sort of a 2-year study of some of the different forms of language and storytelling that surround environmental discourse. And this was supported by a number of workshops and residencies in the Netherlands and Finland, which I will describe. The result is a series of 3 experimental films that just debuted in Amsterdam last week at the 2020 Fiber Festival. The project is called Models for Environmental Literacy, and I'll show a trailer for the films in a moment. But first, I want to share the questions that sort of initiated the project. So I was interested in this. How do we as children and as adults learn about the natural environment at school, through our direct encounters with nature, through mediated forms of communication, television, cinema, the internet? How do we build our individual environmental literacy? With recent technical and critical attention given to artificial intelligence, a similar set of questions may be also asked of non-human agents. How and why are machines made to control natural environments? To what degree can a machine perceive a landscape, drawing upon data rather than lived experiences? And can our observation of this machine perception allow us to reflect upon human nature, our individual understandings of the environment, as well as non-anthropocentric ecological perspectives? So to explore these questions, I created 3 AI language models that were each trained on 500,000 words, one from eco-science texts, one from eco-philosophy, and one from eco-fiction. And these, each of these models contain many authors within each category. So unlike previous projects which I have created, where models were entirely trained on a single author or a single text, these agents are a kind of chorus, emulating the tone, vocabulary, and knowledge of multiple sources. So now I understand the AI sort of generated output that comes from these models as a kind of hybrid language that incorporates many bodies of knowledge. These agents have learned from many different teachers, just like me. So these models generated narrative texts that became the scaffolding for my animated films that are generally about environments at the boundaries of ecological change. An archipelago of small islands in the northern Baltic, an estuary overcome by toxic algae, and a perfectly circular artificial island in the Netherlands. So I'd like to describe those landscapes further. The first chapter, called Whisper Poem, maps the small islands surrounding Helsinki, Finland, which are actually rising twice as fast as the surrounding waters of the Baltic Sea. And this is all part of a 10,000-year process of post-glacial rebound. So instead of reflecting a sort of uncanny image of human intervention like the other chapters in the film, they present a more paradoxical image of a system operating in more geohistorical rather than human timeframes. The title Whisper Poems refers to the logic of the conversation, the AI conversation, in which the last word that was spoken by the scientist AI becomes the prompt for the philosopher AI, and so on with the author AI as well. So there is some continuity in their conversation, but only the continuity provided by a single word, and much is lost. Then chapters 2 and 3 sort of indeed map the direct and indirect effects of engineering on the Dutch landscape. The chapter called Circular Conversations focuses on the isologue, which is arguably the strangest visual landscape in the Netherlands, a perfectly circular island, 1 kilometer across, built for the sort of deep storage of industrial toxic sediment. After first seeing this circle on satellite images and then during subsequent field trips to like drone photograph the sites, I couldn't help imagine it as a kind of like monumental frame upon, or like a portal into the past and present and future of the local environment. And the logic of the dialogue in circular conversations is a loop similar to whisper poems, except each AI is given the entire paragraph from the previous AI as its prompt. So there's far more continuity. They tend to stay more on topic. Chapter 3, called Echo Chambers, shifts focus to the southwest of the Netherlands, where the DeltaWorks engineering project created a different kind of environment. So during Fiber's workshop called Cartographies of the Vanishing Now, we traveled to this area to observe the algae blooms sort of lining the shore and to discuss the complex cultural, hydrological, and agricultural histories that have sort of deeply impacted that ecosystem. The dialogues in echo chambers are a feedback loop in which one model talks uninterrupted and its own output becomes its own prompt or input. So it sort of works on one topic over and over again, almost to the point of absurdity. Now that we've seen the landscapes that were scanned and then animated, and we have a sense of how the dialogues operate, I'll play a trailer for the films.
Models for environmental literacy.
What is an island? Is it a graveyard? In what sense is it an island? Does an island denote a sense of spatial absence?
I'm afraid of the absence. It seems to be forming on me. Its dark forms disturb me. The whole place silent. The stones are a blur.
All of this anxiety and worry goes hand in hand with an ongoing process of change. A change that, although not explicitly recognized by this program, has become obvious to all.
This, for me, is the essential paradox of our stories. In finding our way within the world, we humans invent or modify or redefine reality in ever larger and more incomprehensible ways. So our words are not only a vehicle for revealing the world to the reader, but also a vehicle for revealing the reader. Tell me what you see.
I see here a map, number 3.21, showing the changes in physical characteristics of European ecosystems as caused by climate change.
In order to survive in the new environment, the recognition of these changes will be the first milestone on the road to the realization of the other. Let us sing.
Does othering the other also mean separating care for nature from a commitment to promoting other forms of environmentality? Are care for nature and greed two sides of the same cracked coin?
But this splitting of roles is only one means by which people control the other. It's murky, isn't it? All sorts of things happening at once, everywhere at once. A pigeon can smell a rat from 2,000 feet.
We are now living through the Anthropocene, the point at which human activities can be reliably labeled as contributing to the rise in global average temperature. A rat crawls on all fours because it needs stability.
So it must be our objective to make society eclectically organized, sensu eclectica, as they called it, so that we may preserve the capacity for action, for initiative, for creativity. Tell me what you see. Actually, I don't know what it is.
Where are we? How did this happen? What will we miss the most? These are questions that define how we think about and experience the world. But they are also core questions when thinking about disaster and adaptation.
Where are we? What are we made of? Can we be divided in two? Do we even exist? What do our spatial relations to different living things actually represent? And what is a thing?
Where are we? Let's try to picture the scene. We are at the edge of the forest. At night. It is dream time. There are trees here, but no humans. Overhead, the sky is very dark, a sky of blackness.
I'd also like to share that the entire series of films, which is about 37 minutes long, is being made available to conference participants for the next week. This will be at the following URL, along with the password in all caps, MEL 2020. So to close up, I'd like to share what sort of surprised me about working with these models. There were times when all three spoke very clearly about disaster, the Anthropocene, and adaptation to new environments. And I see that as a somewhat straightforward understanding of the texts that they were trained on, right? But then I also heard them speaking about, more about the effects of these situations in very personal, or if you can call it emotional or even allegorical terms. They get into conversations about anxiety and loneliness and collective memory and even like non-human memory. And at some point, the author AI started even singing its responses. At least the structure and repetition of words was more like a song or a prayer. Another surprise came when the system seemed to be speaking not about the environment, but about the subjectivities of its own outputs. At some point, the author states, our words are not only a vehicle for revealing the world to the reader, but also a vehicle for revealing the reader. And this resonates with me deeply when I think about, reading an AI-generated text or an AI-generated story, rather than sort of trusting a scientist's findings or a philosopher's theories or a novelist's authorship to sort of guide us. The reader is asked to apply their own knowledge and beliefs and aesthetics to the text. Thus, the text reveals as much about the reader as it does about the AI writer. And this, for me, motivates a different kind of understanding about how algorithmic systems or AI can be used to perceive an environment outside of industrial or institutional applications and more within a critical or creative framework. So I'm sorry I can't chat in real time or hear your questions, but I'd be happy to correspond if you'd like to contact me through the following channels. Thanks again to RIXC for hosting this, and thank you for listening. Bye.
For this very well-staged video and also presentation. And now we are moving next with Eva SJUVE and her the new Metopia operations on xenotemporalities in environmental data as sonorous phenomena. And Eva is a media artist working with new technologies and urban spaces. Her most recent work is Metopia, a series of sonifications of environmental data using custom-built interfaces with machine learning. Eva, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I hope you can hear me.
Seeing you.
Let's see. Oh, I have to move. Sorry about this. Okay. I'm going to talk about my project Metopia, which is a series of interfaces for sonification. And I've been, over the time, I've been interested in different kinds of models, both the perceptual model and machine learning model and the model of atmospheres. So I've been working with polluted data from atmospheres in urban surroundings to create various forms of sound worlds with these portable and embodied interfaces to let the audience explore the surroundings for themselves. The meaning of Metopia is the two words meta, which is beyond, and topia, which is the place. It's concerned with climate change and also ecology of human nature, environment, and technology. And because it's portable, it's also dealing with the peripheral perception of movement and vision that comes from a polysma. I'm especially interested in operations of temporalities, that is the active operation of sonification of the data, and how to think about these different temporalities and that of the non-human. So the data I've been engaged with in this material has been pollution from cars, embedded in different environments such as wind, light, temperature, air pressure, but also dust and communication networks surplus. So this is seen from the creation of creating protocols for activating and reframing aspects of being in the world. Use of thinking about temporalities, it's a problem of scale. It's both from the very small scale to the large scale. And Tim Morton say that the environment, the atmosphere is in the background, but it's in a relationship with the foreground. And as soon as we start to concentrate on it, it turns into the foreground. So it's also concerned with this concept of Gestalt theory, how you can turn the background into the foreground and vice versa. The operative is to see how the system is working, how the invisible system of toxic data is working across these different scales and temporalities, which means it's a long time to spend with the data to try to understand the dynamics of it, the variability, the rhythms, and to find these different characteristics of the data. So the question is, how do you make this atmosphere operational and turn it into a form? And it's also a play with a multitude of temporalities, such as the embodied temporality, the situated body, circadian temporalities, and breath, and the sonic phenomena, that they are all coexisting. The French philosopher Henri Bergson investigated time as being duration by using intuition, not experience, but the condition of experience. For Bergson, duration is a synthesis, a multiplicity of temporalities that are overlapping, phase-shifting, coexisting in simultaneity in a topology. Being in duration is not singular, but a plural of temporalities. So this is also interesting for the recent cognitive temporalities. And just a couple of months ago, neuroscience research group CISA, that works across Netherlands and Japan, did a research study what happens in the brain when listening to the rhythms of a song. And they used a functional magnetic resonance imaging camera, fMRI, which shows that a time map exists in the specific area of the brain when you're listening to a song. And this area is the supplementary motor area, the SMA. And this shows that there is a topographic representation of time in the brain. So I'm really interested in these aspects of the cognitive mapping models and how you can use that in sonification work. And there is also a cognitive bias that you can measure that is also recent in the Weizmann Institute of Science, that shows prediction and bias can influence the passage of time, the perception of passage of time, because these two functions are in the same part of the brain. That is located in the forebrain. And this study was made, they used images of monetary gain and losses. And the participants were asked to decide which of the two images they saw on the screen was displayed for a long amount of time. And the images were overlaid with numbers that represented monetary gain and losses. And they showed the bias that time is overestimated when positive errors occur, and when you're represented with a monetary gain. So there's also a real bias in the temporal perception. And talking about the data that's collected with the sensors, I'm also interested in patterns and apophenia that can be generated by patterns, to use that as part of the composition. And weather prediction has been practiced by farmers for a long time to see signs that help predict the future. The sense environmental processes have agency of patterns, both temporal and spatial, And this cognitive ability is linked to our survival, not only the auditory survival. And this is something Herbert Simon noted already in 1968. And people persist in seeking patterns even in environments that's filled with clutter. And also sequential patterns encountered in our lived environment are extracted from surrounding noise and irregularities as a fundamental cognitive activity. And also in intelligence tests, such as serious completion using letters or numbers, the extrapolation made is based on simple periodic patterns. So according to Simon, people are using this pattern recognition ability when confronted by temporal sequences, and that can also be music. And this apophenia, when you look at the patterns, which I'm also interested in, that I have been using in my work, is that the people are looking for patterns even if they don't exist. And pattern completion was something I started to explore more when dealing with non-human temporalities where patterns are very irregular, to see where I can find some correlation between pattern matching and the sound composition. And then there's also the embodied cognition. That's interesting because it's the interface is something you are using when you are walking and listening. And embodied cognition have been not been taken so seriously, but there are intermix that a researcher named Pessoa showed that the emotion and cognition are very much intermixed, and it's impossible to decompose these two strands from the cognitive. So I've been working with different sensing systems, and I also work with machine learning models to manage the data I get. So this is snowflakes that brings both nutrients and also brings pollution, material from pollution to plants that I need. And these are different aspects of pollution, both anthropocentric and non-anthropocentric. This is a volcano outbreak seen from the NASA station. And pollution also disturb every aspect of our body. When it's smaller than 2.5 micrometer, it enters the lung lung respiratory system and goes into the blood system. And they have recently also found pollution located in the brain that was recently discovered. So my kind of my models I've been working on are listening systems. And I will talk a little bit about the machine learning models I've been using. And these are the prediction machines. So I've been using classification models and neural networks in the works I'm going to show. This is a classification model called K nearest neighbor. And you use these hyperparameters in classification. So you can, if you see there are some outliers in the red in the blue field and the blue and the red field. So you can actually create some kind of random function to misuse the machine learning model. And this is something I've been also experimenting with. So I've been, I will show 3 different works. One is Metopia Deep Signal. Yeah.
Dear Eva, I have to interrupt you at this point because we are running out of time. The presentation is already more than 15 minutes, but maybe you can show your slides and very quickly, to come to final. I deeply apologize.
Soundforms Symposium in Copenhagen. In this work, I use voice for the composition, and I'm structuring it using this misuse of the machine learning model, and it also senses light, and it also senses mobile phone networks and wireless networks. So here are the wireless sensors. And I'm using this pattern recognition concept to work with the sound. So this is also a way to activate the personal participation in the works, which is part of the operation of the signals. So I will play. So in the vocal artist in Deep Signal was Nuria Divi. She's based in New York. And in that piece, I used vocal utterances to make fragments out of them to explore the patterns of the wireless signal and the mobile phone signals, and the light also as a function being a part of the model. So it's not three separate strands of data. I make the data as a function of each other. So it becomes sort of a matrix of the data that instruct the sound itself. So I'm interested in this kind of sonified patterns so you can tune into the world and explore the world.
Dear Eva, I have to interrupt you immediately.
The next work I will show is Utopia Gas, and this is a work that's dealing with exhaust from cars.
Dear Eva, I have to interrupt you immediately. You are running out of 20 minutes.
That is another way of creating rhythmic patterns to work with the data. So in this work, I use fragmented melodic motifs and its tonal composition. And it's a variant between consonance and just dissonance. And using various
Viņiem nav skaņas. Man nav skaņas.
And these are also, it's also based on a non-linear model of mapping the data, because they're all functions of each other. And this is something I call pattern resolution.
Šis te jau ir, tūlīt būs 25 minūtes viņi runā. Ir gandrīz 10 pāri jau.
Tev jānospiež Anju.
Dear Eva, I deeply apologize. You are already speaking more than 20 minutes, and we were not able to announce you rather than to end this very abruptly, but the etiquette is only 15 minutes. This is the reason why I'm pressed to act very unpolitely, and we have to continue our panel, and it will be continued by video of Adnan Hadzi. And Adnan Hadzi currently working as resident academic in the Department of Digital Arts at the Faculty of Media and Knowledge Sciences, University of Malta. And before that, he has developed his research at Goldsmiths, University of London. And now, let's play the video. Please, technical staff, please play the video.
Thank you to the organizers of this conference for making this conference happening virtually and for inviting me to speak on artificial intelligence and social justice. This paper is the outcome of...
Can you play the video? Man neatbild. One short moment, we have some technical small issue, and I hope.
virtually and for inviting me to speak on artificial intelligence and social justice. This paper is the outcome of a research collaboration between myself from the Faculty of Media and Knowledge Sciences at the University of Malta and Dr. Denis Irojo, who is researching into algorithmic sovereignty and the co-founder of the think tank Dyna.org from the Netherlands. In order to lay the foundations for discussion around the argument that the adoption of artificial intelligence, AI technologies, benefits the powerful few, focusing on their own existential concerns, we decided to narrow down our analysis of the argument to jurisprudence, the philosophy of law, considering also the historical contexts. The paper does not discuss current forms and applications of artificial intelligence, as so far there is no AI technology which is self-conscious and self-aware, being able to deal with emotional and social intelligence. It is a discussion around AI as a speculative, hypothetical entity. One could then ask, if such a speculative self-consciousness hardware-software system were created, at what point could one talk of personhood? And what criteria could there be in order to say an AI system was capable of committing AI crimes? In order to address AI crimes, the paper will start by outlining what might constitute personhood in discussing legal positivism and natural law. Concerning what constitutes AI crime, the paper uses the criteria given by Thomas King's et al. Paper, Artificial Intelligence Crime and Interdisciplinary Analysis of the Foreseeable Threats and Solutions, where King et al. Coined the term AI crime. Mapping 5 areas in which AI might, in the foreseeable future, commit crimes, namely 1. Commerce, financial markets, and insolvency. 2. Harmful or dangerous drugs. 3. Offenses against personhood. 4. Sexual offenses. 5. Theft and fraud and forgery and personalization. We discussed the construction of a legal system through the lens of a political involvement and what one may want to consider to be the powerful elites. In doing so, we will be demonstrating that it is difficult to prove that the adoption of AI technologies is undertaken in a way which mainly serves a powerful class in society. Nevertheless, analyzing the culture around AI technologies with regard to the nature of law, with a philosophical and sociological focus, enables us to demonstrate a utilitarian and authoritarian trend in the adoption of AI technologies. I will then narrow down our discussion of utilitarian trends through the use of Tim Crook's notion of power elites. This is where Michel Foucault on discipline and power come in. According to Foucault, the disciplinary power of legislation leads to a self-discipline of individuals. Foucault argues that the institutions of court and judges motivate such a self-disciplining of individuals, and that self-disciplining rules serves more and more as a norm. Foucault's theories are especially helpful in discussing how the rule of truth has disciplined civilization, allowing for an adoption of AI technologies which seem to benefit mainly the powerful elite. But then, should we think of a notion of deep truth as the unwieldy product of deep learning AI algorithms? Discussions around truth, Foucault states, from legislation into something what, and here I quote Foucault, decides, transmits, and itself extends upon the effects of power, end of quote, are Foucault's theories help to explain how legislation as an institution is rolled out throughout society with very little resistance or proletarian counter-justice. Foucault explains that this has made the justice system and legislation a for-profit system. With this understanding of legislation and social justice, one needs to reflect further on Foucault's notion of how disciplinary power seeks to express its distributed nature in the modern state. Namely, one has to analyze the distributed nature of those AI technologies, especially through networks and protocols, so that the link can now be made to AI technologies becoming legally more profitable in the hands of a powerful elite. If power generates new opportunities rather than simply repressing them, then, following Foucault, more interaction and participation can extend and not simply challenge power relations. Foucault offers a valuable insight into power relations relevant also within AI technologies. It is the product of research that was undertaken by Foucault over a period of 20 years. Foucault uses the metaphor of a chemical catalyst for a resistance which can bring to light power relationships and thus allow for an analysis of the methods this power uses. And here I quote Foucault, rather than analyzing power from the point of view of its internal rationality, it consists of analyzing power relations through the antagonisms of strategies. End of quote. In his book Protocol, Alexander Galloway describes how these protocols change the notion of power and how control exists after decentralization. Galloway argues that the protocol has a close connection to Foucault's concept of biopolitics by claiming that the key to perceiving protocol is power to acknowledge that protocol is an effective aesthetic force that has control over life itself. Galloway suggests that it is important to discuss more than the technologies and to look into the structures of control within technology system, which also includes underlying codes and protocols in order to distinguish between methods that can support collective production. Example here, sharing of AI technologies within society, and those that put AI technologies in the hands of the powerful few. Galloway's argument in his chapter Hacking is that the existence of protocols not only installs control into a terrain that on its surface appears actively to resist it, but goes on to create the highly controlled network environment. For Galloway, hacking is an index of protological transformation taking place in the broader world of a technoculture. Here, John Adams and Roger Burnswood give a more nuanced view of contemporary legislation. They argue that legislation aims to institute public order. Legislation sets up authoritative mechanisms whereby social order can be established and maintained. Social change manage disputes, settled policies and goals for the community adopted. Adams and Burns would go on to argue that legal code is good in the favor of a powerful elite, and that those who engage more with politics in society, examples of which could be the corporate sector producing AI technologies and businesses and elites kind of seeking to use AI technologies for profits, etc. According to Adams and Burnswood, there seems to be no unbiased, fair legislation or legal code, and the maintenance of public order must simply reproduce an unfair class society. If this is the case, following Adams and Burnswood argumentation, one can argue that indeed the adoption of AI technologies does not allow for a utilitarian ethical code benefiting society, but rather conforms to the interests of a small group, those owning AI technologies. It becomes evident that the freedom to engage with those technologies is left to those who have the financial means, and of course with it the legal means to do so. In a culture dominated by economics, legislations and technologies are being outlined and modeled by those powerful elites. Most institutions concerned by the debate on ethics of automation today have resorted to the adoption of a so-called open world assumption principle, providing a sort of safety valve. As a last resort, civil rights to raise a flag and ask for intervention of a human being in the analysis of consideration of judicial decisions. In such a case, institutional operators can always override decisions established by automated systems, posing risks of different nature to the integrity of the process. Having said this, the prospect could be raised that restorative justice might offer a solution that could deliver a more meaningful justice with respect to AI technologies and the potential inherent for speculative AI crimes, as outlined in the beginning of this paper. Instead of following a retributive legislative approach, an ethical discourse with a deeper consideration for sufferers of such AI crimes could be adopted. Acting ethically is more difficult than ever, nevertheless, nowadays, due to the hyper expansion of big data and also artificial intelligence. Following the semantic slide from the noun university to that of enterprise, Research into artificial intelligence has gone from being a public service undertaken mainly at universities to being run and regarded as business, run by big corporations such as Alphabet, the parent company of Google and Facebook, etc., created to generate profits. The companies need to attract a large number of paying customers. AI technologies have become workers in the market economy, rarely following any ethical guidelines. We ask, could restorative justice offer an alternative way of dealing with the occurrence of AI crimes? Dale Miller and Neil Vidmar describe two psychological perceptions of justice. One is behavioral control, following the legal code as strictly as possible, punishing any wrongdoer, and second, the restorative justice system, which focuses on restoration. Thus, an alternative approach for the ethical implementation of AI technologies with respect to legislation might be to follow restorative justice principles. Restorative justice would allow for AI technologies to learn how to care about ethics. Julia Fionda describes restorative justice as a conciliation between victim and offender, during which the offense is deliberated upon. Both parties try to come to an agreement on how to achieve restoration for the damage done to the situation before the crime, here an AI crime, happened. Restorative justice advocates compassion for the victim and offender and a consciousness in the part of the offenders as to the repercussion of their crimes. One can argue that these evils are being more evident nowadays with the advance of AI technologies. For AI crimes, punishment in the classical sense may seem to be adequate. Niels Christie, however, criticizes this form of execution of the law. He argues that through conflict there is the potential to discuss the rules given by the law, allowing for a restorative process rather than a process characterized by punishment and strict following of the rules. Christie states that those suffering most from crimes are suffering twice, as although it is the offenders being put on trial, the victims have very little say in the courtroom hearings, where mainly lawyers argue with one another. It basically boils down to guilty or not guilty, and no discussion in between. Christie argues that running restorative conferencing session helps both sides to come to terms with what happened. The victims of AI crimes would not only be placed in front of a court, but also be offered engagement in the process of seeking justice and restoration. Restorative justice might support victims of AI crimes better than the punitive legal system, as it allows for the sufferers of AI crimes to be heard in a personalized way, which could be adapted to the needs of the victims and offenders. As victims and offenders represent themselves in restorative conferencing session, these become much more affordable, meaning that the barrier to seeking justice due to the financial cost would be partly eliminated, allowing for poor parties to be able to contribute to the process of justice. This would benefit wider society, and AI technologies would not only be defined by a powerful elite. Restorative justice could hold the potential not only to discuss the AI crimes themselves, but also to get to the root of the problem and discuss the cause of an AI crime, making re-offending harder. In such a scenario, a future AI system capable of committing AI crimes would need to have knowledge of ethics around the particular discourse of restorative justice. The implementation of AI technologies will lead to a discourse around who is responsible for actions taken by AI technologies. Even when considering clearly defined ethical guidelines, these might be difficult to implement due to the pressure of competition of AI systems they find themselves in. That said, this speculation is restricted to humanized artificial intelligence systems. The main hindrance for AI technologies to be part of such a restorative justice system might be that of the very human emotion of shame. And with that, I come kind of to the conclusion, proposing a so-called advanced jurisprudence. Without a clear understanding of shame, it will be impossible to resolve AI crimes in a restorative manner. Thus, one might want to think about a humanized, a cyborgian proposal of a symbiosis between humans and technology along the lines of Garry Kasparov's advanced chess, as in advanced jurisprudence, a legal system where human and machine work together on restoring justice for social justice. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please do feel free to contact me or email. My email address is here on the final slides. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Keep in track, I ask all questions to be put in the chat. And now I would like to welcome our last presenter for this panel, Jakub Palm, with sandboxing in the ecosphere on meeting the forecasting needs of a super-elect. And Jakub Palm is a philosophy PhD student that deals with intersections of philosophy of technology, futurology, epistemology, and utilitarianism. His scientific interest lies within contribution to development of epistemically oriented superintelligence. Welcome, Jakub. The floor is yours now for 15 minutes strictly, please. And this session will be ended by Rasa Schmitte because she will continue the next session without any break. The floor is yours now, Jakub, please. We are waiting for your presentation.
Okay, hello and thanks for having me. I'm just dropping you a link where you can, when we might be able to discuss these topics further after the presentation. I will try to make this as short as possible. If you can share my screen, then you will be able to see the same thing I've dropped just a moment ago. This is a link for the widget of SwarmCheck web application that we are developing in the Optimum Pareto Foundation in Krakow, Poland. So this is a means of, in the very end, of automated argumentation mapping. And if you can see it and click any boxes that contain some physics, you might agree, disagree, or stillman any physics that are presented in the graph. And this is something I will use in this browser tab, and the content of this represents the most important remarks of the presentation. Just a quick note, the blue arrows are Stillman relations, green ones are green ones, and the red ones are those that are in disagreeing relation. And the main thesis here is that one that what started this enterprise is that superintelligence tends to subjugate its surrounding ecosphere for self-development. This is something that was, I will, of course, describe briefly each of those phases boxes. This is something that was derived from the works of Ray Kurzweil, one of the main, mostly known transhumanist thinkers, that in some of the epochs after the emergence of singularity, the moment of some superintelligent being that will be a result of artificial intelligence self-development, we might be able to be so scientifically and technologically advanced as a civilization that we will be able to create a computranium of almost everything. It is, we might be able to rearrange all the matter and energy in the universe in a way that there will be some vastly in the scale, in the quality, and so on, intelligence awakening in the universe. Everything that is energical and material will be intelligent in the Kurzweilian sense. And thus, the Stillman version of this argument is one that presents the following sentence. A superintelligence tends to reorganize its surroundings into a computranium. The surroundings part is important here because, well, any superintelligence, any artificial intelligence or other intelligence, it is mainly presented in the sense that Nick Bostrom used in his book titled Superintelligence whatsoever, might be able to reorganize itself into something that will further its goals. It might be by subjugating its matter. It might be something like a gray goose scenario that some nanotechnological forms and so on might use other beings, other non-living material and similar entities to strengthen its properties, to reorganize its structure in a way that it will be the most optimal way to provide some computational operations and mainly speaking, or more blatantly, to just further its growth. And so on, this surrounding part might be limited to the ecosphere that is presented on a given planet, for example, Earth. Moreover, the aspect of subjugating the surrounding ecosphere for the self-development is strengthened by the following combination of physics. One, that the superintelligence self-development relies upon the resource optimization, as I mentioned earlier, and the elements of ecosphere can be considered resources for a superintelligence. It might be something as basic as silicon for the silicon wafers and so on, but it might be something more sophisticated, as for example, we might see a large-scale cyborgization. We might be able to conceptualize a superintelligence, an artificial intelligence that will rely on some brain activities that will be measured by neural implants and so on. Moreover, this physics has a conclusion that an ecosphere subjugation might be needed for meeting epistemic needs of a superintelligence. This is combined with the thesis that is also pointing to the main one, the not still meant one, that meeting the epistemic needs of a superintelligence might be a crucial drive of superintelligence enterprises, in this case, the self-development. This is something that is present somewhat extensively in pop cultural works. One of the main titles that I highly recommend you is the Golem the 14th, by Stanisław Lem. It presents a supercomputer that was as originally conceptualized a military one that eventually was interested not in any warfare activities, but in total universal comprehension, something that is pointed out in this thesis. And this is something that is also present in the works of many current physicists, that the total universe comprehension is an enterprise that is fulfilling the science as a whole, that it might be the eventual goal, the ultimate goal of science as it is, because if we might be able to formulate the theory of everything, that we might be able to create a mathematical formula that will somewhat combine all those theories that we have at the moment, that then we might be able to present a way of predicting what will happen in the universe in its future, and maybe extrapolate in a historical sense to the past. This is something that was also presented in pop cultural works. You might be familiar with the HBO series Devs. Moreover, we might be able to somewhat entail that the theory of everything thing is might be just a task given to a superintelligence. It might be something that is not a drive of the entity, but something that was imposed for it by its creators. But there might be also some tasks that have no epistemic origins. You might be familiar with the concept of paperclip optimizer. Paperclip optimizer is an experimental thought a thought experiment rather that presents an super intelligent or just artificial intelligent being that is tasked with creating just paper clips, and by relying on its function, it will try to create more and more paper clips to create it more efficiently, and thus it will need to use all the material that it has in its surroundings, thus in its ecosphere, and then turn eventually the whole universe, as it can reach for it, into a giant paperclip. This is something that is not related to the epistemic drives, but still might be a familiar concept. The sandboxing experiment, the sandboxing enterprise that is somewhat foreshadowed here, might not be present at the moment in the graph, but it depends on the predictional value of super intelligent enterprises. It is if one super intelligent being or any other intelligence wanted to scan its surroundings, then it might be able to, as Kurzweil said, it will be beneficial for anyone who is interested in a large-scale algorithmization or mind uploading and so on. It might be able to create a given environment that will be I'm sorry, I have some technical issues with the UI. It might be able to recreate that thing in its simulational enterprises. By sandboxing in here, I mean, okay, it can scan its surroundings before it will be subjugated, before it will be somewhat not annihilated, but absorbed into its structure. And then it will be able to recreate all that was happening in the ecosphere in its simulations, in its prediction, but it will be present only in the virtual reality, not in the actual one, if you might rely on this kind of dichotomy. The other thing that you might consider as a sandboxing in this enterprise is that any superintelligence that might be tasked with or self-tasked with the total universal comprehension might be the one that it would like to not interfere with the ecosphere, because it will not have to. There is not any reassuring at the moment concept that every matter, every energy that is present in the universe might be needed for achieving that theory of everything. We have some physical concepts like Bekenstein's bound that presents us how much information might be contained in the universe. And by that, it is not, and it is a formula that relies on a mass, radius, and many other variables that are physical in its ontology. But still, it doesn't mean that gathering all that variables, all that physical properties are needed to comprehend the universe as a total. It might be not necessary, and thus a superintelligence might sandbox the ecosphere in the way that it will not need to interfere with it. I think the best way to preserve the time at the moment is to stop screen sharing at the moment. And if you have any questions, any other theses that are to develop these topics further, I just recommend you using that linked graph. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jakub. There is a question for you from Raitis. he is asking, when you are suggesting that superintelligence can be created everywhere, can you please clarify what do you mean by superintelligence?
Could you repeat the last few words? I couldn't hear it.
Can you clarify what do you mean by superintelligence? Because you were suggesting that it can be created anywhere.
Okay, thanks. By superintelligence, I mean the same that Kurzweil said, and sorry for not clarifying it earlier. It is superintelligence is an intelligent being that is vastly more. I don't want to say optimal because it's not the best word to describe it. It is superior in the intelligent way, more than the combined efforts of all intelligences that are present in a given area. By Kurzweil said it something like a superintelligent being is the one that surpasses all human intelligences on the planet. Just for example. And by saying that it might be created anywhere, it might be created by some extraplanetary civilization. It might not origin on planet Earth. It might be, for example, developed by some human-originated colony somewhere in our solar system or something like that.
Okay, thank you so much. So we are already getting back into the atmosphere and universe, which also connects us to the next presentations, and especially following the keynote by Marko Peljhan, Sensing Remotely, which will follow the last panel. So I